It seems to me that a lot of urbanist theory seems to be anthropocentric in a manner, in that it seems to be based on this separation from nature, that we need to move away from nature. We can't interact with it, or we risk destroying or dominating it somehow. It doesn't. When we talk about die-off, when we talk about moving to cities and population density, we seem to be only talking about human population density, and I'm wondering about this separation with nature, which seems that's a big part of many of John's theories, is that separation of nature seems to be a big problem that we have. So how is urbanist theory inherently anthropocentric? Does it value the lives of humans and the 7 billion human population over the lives of the many animals and plants that are being killed through this process of people living in cities?
Well, that's a long answer, but let's go with, so firstly just say like urbanist theory is a huge, vast range of thinking, right? So there's one tiny chunk that I'm carving out here, right? So that's one. Two, I guess the simple answer would be, what I'm arguing is the exact opposite, right? It's in fact, it's the massive, wasteful sprawling of human beings across the landscape that is in fact decimating, animal and plant populations. That, in fact, the idea of living compactly, the idea of living lesser, is specifically in terms, as I kind of turned to that theme several times today, is specifically around lessening our impact, right? And that if we're really interested in, nature, in the natural world, we're going to stay the hell out of it, frankly speaking, right? As I use my whale watching example, right? You like whales, leave them the fuck alone, right? You like the natural world, stay out of it, frankly speaking. That's a simpler answer. The longer answer, which I won't burden with you too much, is to say that I think a huge amount of our way we think and talk about nature is, for a technical term, fucked up, and weird and messed up. And I don't exclude myself from that at all. So let me give you a couple of examples. So for those of you that remember, in 2006, there was this huge windstorm. Jen, you would have probably heard about this. There's a massive windstorm in Vancouver. I don't know if it was here or not, but this huge windstorm that just like wiped the shit out of Stanley Park. Just took down it was like 1,000 trees or something like that in Stanley Park, and there's just like stuff everywhere, just laid waste to Stanley Park, as well as lots of the rest of the city. And there was this immediate, virtually immediate mobilization in the city. Stories in the paper, people just desperately upset. There are pictures of people walking around Stanley Park crying because of the trees got, and there were these giant, lovely trees that got wiped out, and like a heron habitat got trashed, and literally, this sounds ridiculous, but I kid you not, within a week, $8 million had been raised for restoration of Stanley Park, and people were just crushed about this natural, this destruction of nature, And it struck me as, not just me, but many other people, as really bizarre, right? In lots of ways. For one, what's more natural than a windstorm blowing down a tree? Off the top of my head, right? That strikes me as really natural. But also the idea of Stanley Park as nature. You can go through those trees, right? You can go through the what do you call them? The trails through the forest and stuff. It's cool. There's lots of big trees, and there's chipmunks and that. Well, I don't mean that. Seriously, I don't mean that facetiously. Speaking of which, those two the gray squirrels you see everywhere, and every once in a while I get my thing. Those are a gift from the city of New York to the city of Vancouver at the inauguration. Every gray squirrel in Vancouver comes from 2 gray squirrels that New York donated or gave to us as a gift. So, just saying. So that certainly is a point of considering our relationship with nature, which is very odd, I think, and confused in lots of ways. So, for example, would you consider your dog nature? Anybody? Some people, yes. Some people, yes. I mean, help me out. Some people, yes. Some people, no. Right? Your dog is nature. What about your, what about the yard? I mean, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to fool you in any, make fun of you. I promise this. Because I'm as confused as anybody. So what about the grass in front of out here, for example? I saw a nice, looks like there's a park behind us here maybe. What about that grass? Anybody consider that nature? No. Somebody? No? Nobody? Some people consider that nature? Yes, some people do. What about then, for example, say a provincial park? What's the nearest provincial park? Strathcona maybe up here? Or, I don't know, some big park? Let's say a big park. Would anybody consider that nature? I'm getting some yeses, some nos. What about, for example, a lake? Let's say, what's a lake near here? Elk Lake, let's say. Elk Lake, is Elk Lake nature? That thing's been there forever. Nature, anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, some? Yeah, cool. So I got a fairly equal smattering of yeses and nos.
Anybody here not part of nature?
Yeah, so...
Natural by definition.
Yeah.
Does anybody here have DNA that was not created by nature?
Right. Well, it's really... Well, let me pick that up.
This dispute right here.
Shit, I lost it. Sorry, but my signal on board got lost. I knew I was going to lose it. So, but just work with me on just for half a second here, right? Sorry to stall you here. Which is to say that what I got was a lot of people saying yes to some of those answers, and a lot of people saying no to a lot of those same answers. Which is sort of more or less what I think too. Which is to say that the idea, and I used this phrase before, is that there is no such thing as nature, in my opinion. Is that the idea of nature is contingent. It's constantly constructed. It's constantly evolving, right? And nature is not a thing that exists outside of natural evolution. It's constantly evolving, constantly moving, constantly being contested, both within the natural world, but also our conceptions of what is nature. That is to say that our idea of what nature is a constructed one. Certainly there is a natural trajectory, a trajectory of the natural world that exists and has always existed outside of human conception. But how we conceive of nature is a contested and contingent one. So some people will get incredibly emotional of the desecration of nature when a windstorm blows some of the Stanley Park down. Most of you seem to laugh, but that seems to be something that people hold very dear. My argument would be, if I could just follow that along, and thank you for your patience with me, is that is what the whole world is now. That Google Earth, that satellite imaging, that industrial civilization, that the reach of humanity has turned all of the world into Stanley Park. If there is a tree left standing anywhere on this earth, it's because people decided to let it stand. That there's no part of this earth that is left outside of the possible human control. And I think that is an infinitely regrettable and an increasingly unbelievably untenable position. It's one that I wish were not true. That said, it is one that is true. If there is a part that is not of this earth that is not mined and not forested and left alone, if there are animals whose habitat is not impinged upon, and you cannot go anywhere in the lower 48 and get further than 25 miles away from a road, that's you. If there's a part that we were going to leave, it's because we decided it. And when I say we, I mean humanity, and that's a gross overgeneralization because humanity is not a human. So my argument being is that if we are somehow going to live ecologically in this world, if there are parts of the natural world that are going to survive, despite it, there will be political decisions. The fate of the world is in our grubby fucking little hands. And that sucks, but it's true. And there's no way out of that. And so that a retreat or a run from politics is there a retreat or run from those decisions that are potentially going to leave some parts of the earth untouched. And so my interest is not in leaving nature per se, but out of respect. And out of a profound respect for all the living creatures on earth and the what's left of ecosystems that we've left plausibly unfucked over. But there are parts of that ecosystem that I'm not willing to brook, frankly, and that I think the idea that all species deserve equal consideration is untrue. Ebola can kiss my ass, you know, frankly speaking. That's a technical term too. And so that much of that, our conception of what nature is, cannot be removed from the construction of the political. And as well, I'm sorry I didn't have to answer you directly here, man, but I would say that the question then of whether or not humans are part of nature or not part of nature is a very tricky one in lots of ways. Because in many ways, our initial first answer is, of course we're human. That's the problem with what's going on right now. That's the problem for ecocide. That's the problem with ecological destruction, is that we've forgotten that we're part of nature, that we're part of natural evolution, that obviously we're part of nature. That's the first answer. The second one, and I think an answer that's pretty much untouchable, is if you believe that humans are part of nature, then you believe that genetic engineering and nuclear fission are natural processes. And I'm not willing to have that. So many nature philosophers have attempted to try to reconcile that in a whole variety of ways. People have talked about first nature and second nature, that maybe our first nature is, you hear people reference this in all kinds of ways, right? You hear people say, well, it's kind of the beast in me that came out or something, right? As if there was some other thing inside you that was the natural part that, or the reversion to nature. And I'm not necessarily positing anything in particular here, because my thinking on it is, I'm both curious and evolving and questioning and thinking about it, except to point out a whole number of contradictions in whether I'm not willing to say that we're part of nature, because I'm not willing to say that genetic engineering and biotechnology is a natural process. Which is to say, all of that is to add to the idea that what we're after is contested here. And to my mind, that I'm not interested in a retreat from politics, nor from social organizing. Civilization is not a word that I use. It's not a word that rolls off a white settler boy's mouth very easily without feeling shame. So the word I'm after here, I think, is social organizing, and I'm not afraid to. I don't want us to be afraid to run from it. I think that it's our route to an ecological future, and that I think that the fate that we've been cast, the die that's been cast, is regrettable in many ways, but that we should embrace that challenge. And keep your comments shorter. I'm done.
Okay.